think it's better to use a paper map or a map on your phone?
I definitely prefer using a map on my phone. It's convenient, always up to date, and it shows live directions with traffic updates. Paper maps are nice in theory, but they can be bulky and hard to read if you're in a rush or in the dark.
When was the last time you needed to use a map?
Just last weekend, actually, I went to a new cafe in a part of the city I'm not very familiar with, so I used Google Maps. Without it, I probably would have gotten lost. It's become second nature now to rely on phone maps.
If you visit a new city, do you always use a map to find your way around?
Yes, almost always I do that. When I'm in a new city, I don't want to waste time getting lost. Maps help me locate public transport, restaurants, or tourist spots quickly. I usually download an offline version just in case there's no internet connection. In general, do you find it easy to read maps? I think I'm fairly good at it. I've gotten used to reading digital maps over time, but with paper maps, it can be tricky to orient yourself or estimate distances accurately. So yes, for digital, not so much for traditional ones.
Do you think it's okay to arrive late when meeting a friend?
It really depends on the situation and how close the friendship is. If it's just a few minutes and there's a valid reason, like traffic, most friends would be understanding. But if someone is habitually late, it shows a lack of respect for the other person's time. Personally, I believe punctuality is a form of courtesy, even with friends, and it helps maintain trust and reliability in the relationship.
What should happen to people who arrive late for work?
In a professional setting, repeated lateness shouldn't be taken lightly. Initially, a verbal warning might be enough, but if it becomes a pattern, formal actions like written warnings or deductions in pay could be justified. Arriving late consistently can affect the whole team, especially in time-sensitive environments. However, employers should also look into the reasons. Sometimes lateness is linked to personal or transport issues that could be solved with flexible hours or remote work options.
Can you suggest how people can make sure they don't arrive late?
One way is to always plan to arrive 10 to 15 minutes early. People should also factor in possible delays like traffic or bad weather. Setting alarms and reminders can help, especially if someone has a tendency to lose track of time. Another strategy is to prepare things the night before, like clothes, documents, or directions, so they're not scrambling at the last minute. It's about creating habits that prioritize punctuality.
Is it better to study for long periods or in shorter blocks of time?
Most research supports the idea that shorter, focused study blocks are more effective. The Pomodoro technique, for instance, uses 25-minute sessions with breaks in between, and many students find it boosts concentration. Long study sessions can lead to fatigue and reduced retention. However, for subjects requiring deep focus, like maths or science, longer periods might be useful occasionally. So it really depends on the task and the person's learning style.
What are the likely effects of students not managing their study time well?
Poor time management can lead to last-minute cramming, increased stress, and lower performance. It may also affect sleep and overall health if students constantly stay up late to finish work. Over time, this can harm their academic confidence. For example, I had a classmate who was really bright but always disorganized, and his grades started to drop because he couldn't keep up with deadlines. Planning and consistency are essential for long-term academic success.
How important is it for students to have enough leisure time?
Leisure time is absolutely vital, in my opinion. It helps students recharge, stay mentally healthy, and avoid burnout. Activities like sports, music, or just spending time with friends provide a much-needed break from academic pressure. Without this balance, students can become overwhelmed and even lose interest in their studies. In the long run, having time to relax actually improves productivity and focus.
Do you have a favorite cafe?
Yes, there's a small cafe near my university that I really like. It has a cozy atmosphere, good coffee, and soft background music. It's also not too crowded, which makes it a great place to relax or read a book. I go there whenever I need a quiet break from everything.
Do you often go to cafes by yourself?
I do that from time to time, especially when I want to get some work done or clear my head. Sitting alone in a cafe with a hot drink helps me think better, and the environment is usually more relaxed than at home or in a library.
What do you think helps to make a cafe very popular?
I think a mix of factors contributes to a cafe's popularity. The quality of drinks and food, the ambiance, the location, and how friendly the staff are. A cafe that offers free Wi-Fi, comfortable seating, and a welcoming vibe will always attract regular customers, especially students and freelancers.
Why do some people prefer cafes that are part of large chains rather than small local cafes?
That's probably because chain cafes offer consistency. People know exactly what to expect in terms of menu and service, no matter which branch they go to. Also, chain cafes are often more spacious, with better amenities. But personally, I feel small cafes have more character and charm.
Do you think that most beauty products are a waste of money?
To a certain extent, yes. Many beauty products make big promises that they can't always deliver on. People often buy them because of clever marketing rather than actual need. Having said that, not all products are a waste. Some skincare items, like sunscreen or moisturizer, are genuinely useful. I think the issue is more about excessive spending on unnecessary items, rather than the products themselves being entirely pointless.
How does the beauty industry advertise its products so successfully?
The beauty industry knows how to tap into people's emotions and insecurities. Advertisements often show idealized images of beauty, making people feel they need the product to look attractive or youthful. Social media influencers and celebrities also play a big role in making products look desirable. On top of that, the use of catchy slogans, sleek packaging, and limited edition tactics create urgency and boost sales.
Do you think that it's okay that beauty products should not be advertised to children?
I completely agree with that view. Children are highly impressionable and may not fully understand the purpose of beauty products. If they're exposed to ads at a young age, it can lead to body image issues or pressure to look a certain way. It's important to let children grow up with confidence in their natural appearance, rather than being influenced by unrealistic beauty standards from a young age.
Why do many people equate youth with beauty?
That's an interesting question. Culturally and historically, youth has been associated with health, vitality, and attractiveness. The media reinforces this idea by mostly featuring young, flawless models in advertisements and entertainment. As a result, people often link beauty with being young, even though beauty can exist at any age. This mindset is slowly changing, though, as more people embrace diversity and aging gracefully.
Do you think that being beautiful could affect a person's success in life?
Honestly, yes, to a certain extent. Studies have shown that attractive people are often perceived more positively and may be given more opportunities, especially in fields like media, sales, or hospitality. For example, someone with a pleasant appearance might have an easier time in a customer-facing job. However, long-term success depends on skills, character, and intelligence. So while beauty might open some doors, it's not the only factor that matters in the long run.
Why might society's ideas about beauty change over time?
Society's definition of beauty often reflects cultural values, media trends, and even economic conditions. As these factors shift, so do beauty standards. For instance, in the past, being pale was fashionable because it meant you didn't work outside. Later, tan skin became popular, as it was linked to leisure and travel. Nowadays, there's more awareness of body positivity and inclusivity, so ideas about beauty are becoming broader and more diverse than ever before.